Delighted to welcome right now the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab to the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. So much to talk about this morning. I've noted a lot of other journalists this morning have been asking you about your holiday in Crete. I'm going to tell you right now, I couldn't give two hoots about your holiday in Crete. I want to talk about the people who right now are stuck in Kabul. Joe Biden yesterday ruled out an extension to next Tuesday's deadline for getting out of Afghanistan, despite pleas from Macron, Merkel and Boris Johnson as well. How soon will we have to end evacuation flights for not just British citizens, but also those many Afghan interpreters and their families who've helped us over the years, if that is the deadline?
Well, the evacuation goes till the end of August, and we'll need a limited amount of time to draw down the military personnel and equipment. We've got days, not weeks. That's clear.
How many days? Well, people are saying Thursday or Friday could be the last evacuation flight. Is that right?
So the military planners are firming up the details of that and trying to limit the amount to the bare minimum that they need in order to extend the window as far as we physically can to get people out. I would just say to your listeners, Julia, since April, because we've really started this since April when the Foreign Office told British nationals to leave Afghanistan immediately, we've seen through that the advice that we provided and then the evacuation since August, over 11,000 returned to the UK. That's British nationals as well as Afghan workers. In the last 24 hours, I can tell you that we've secured safe passage of 2,000 out. So we'll keep going as fast and as high capacity as we can in the hours and days that we've got left.
And yet that capacity is nothing like what we actually need. Of course, we know, thousands of interpreters and others worked with us and with NGOs and other civilian organisations to try and help our efforts in Afghanistan over the last 20 years. They've all got families, extended families. We need to get those people out. Earlier in the show, I spoke to a former Afghan interpreter for the British Army, Syed. He was able to get to this country some years back, waited 3 years for his wife and daughter to get to this country, still has family. Some of them have managed to go out. His brother, he believes, has been taken by the Taliban and believes has been executed. I said I was going to speak to you in a short while, and I asked him what he'd like to say to you. Have a listen to what he had to say.
I would have told him to please help us. Please save our lives. Please save those people who... Please save our families.
There are thousands of people like Syed who are desperately pleading for their families' lives to be saved. We're not going to save all of them, are we?
Look, it's heartbreaking to hear situations like that. That's why we've had this evacuation scheme to deliver safe passage. And that's why, as I said, since April, we've secured safe passage for 11,000 British nationals and Afghan workers and other vulnerable Afghans, like the achieving scholars that are coming back on flights. So look, when I hear something like that, and as compelling as it is, it just makes us redouble even further our efforts on the ground in the time that we've got remaining. And of course, after the end of the evacuation, we will make contingency plans. The Taliban, whatever it says, will not be able to hermetically seal the borders. There will be that the more they try and behave coercively, the more the flow, the exodus will chances increase. So we'll have a contingency plan to deal with third countries, to support them, and also to process the claims and the cases and the eligibility of the cases of the nationals and indeed the Afghan workers. So it will not all end when troops withdraw, but of course it will be significantly more challenging. But that's also going to be a challenge for the Taliban. Do they want the financial, economic system, the social system, such as it is in Afghanistan, as rudimentary as it is, do they want it to collapse? If not, they're going to need to be able to engage with international interlocutors. And our number one priority, and the PM was clear from the G7 summit, leaders meeting that he convened yesterday, that safe passage out for our nationals and our work and Afghan workers was our top priority.
I mean, do you have any regrets about what the government did or didn't do, what you did or didn't do, whether it's, I don't know, whether it's about your holiday, going on a holiday, coming back from a holiday? Is it about trusting Joe Biden when he told the G7 leaders that he would leave his troops in long enough to get everyone out, not bringing people out sooner, 11,000 out since April, clearly not enough. Do you think that you have regrets and that things you would do differently with the information you know now?
Well, certainly, look, Julia, with the benefit of hindsight, which is the prerogative and the luxury of commentators, not politicians doing the job, of course, there's all sorts of things you would factor in. But the reality is the the Taliban takeover has been more rapid than anyone, including I think the Taliban, expected. We have got 11,000 out today since April, and we're doing everything we can with our international partners to look at what the next phase will involve. Safe passage is one area, making sure that the terrorist threat cannot be presented from inside Afghanistan the way it obviously was over 9/11. The humanitarian relief to avoid the destabilizing of the region. That is going to require, if the Taliban want any support, any engagement on those things, it's going to require them to do some things too. The other bit I think is important is not just the G7, as important as those partners are, but I've been reaching out to the Pakistani foreign minister, the Indian foreign minister, the Chinese foreign minister, the caucus of countries that will exercise the maximum moderating influence. We'll exert all the levers, such as they are, but all the levers at our disposal with all of the partners we can to try and deliver a more benign and a less malign Taliban administration.
It's a bit of a worry if we're relying on Iran and Pakistan, China and Russia for a moderating influence, isn't it?
Well, look, we're going to need to deal with some partners who ordinarily will be uncomfortable if they're the ones that have can magnify the leverage that we collectively can exert over the Taliban.
Well, what leverage do we have? I mean, we're talking about the economic sanctions. We're talking about the $9 billion of Afghan assets in banks in US and UK. Is that where we're going to have our leverage? Because if they don't care about that stuff, then we are just going to leave 37 million people to basically return to the medieval dark ages, aren't we?
So sanctions, so the aid, the access to financial institutions, all of those things will matter. And of course, the Chinese and the Russians do not want to be left to pick up, if you like, the financial and economic can here, and they do not want to deal on their own with, nor do the Pakistanis or the Indians, with the destabilizing effect or the risk of terrorism. But the truth is, the Taliban spokesperson overnight was saying he wants to avoid a brain drain from Afghanistan. They're saying that they want to try and keep the institutions running, stave off the financial collapse. I think those things that they want do give us leverage because they will depend on international interlocutors, international partners being able to engage with them. We're not going to engage, cooperate, provide any of those things unless they do certain things and they live up to their assurances.
You spoke earlier about how, hindsight is a nice prerogative to have, but how much hindsight did we really need that this was going to all end like this? Joe Biden has said, it would always have been chaos and difficult and hard at the end. But we knew that Donald Trump had signed this peace deal last year. We knew that Joe Biden had been elected, and part of his platform was that he would remove the US from so-called forever wars. We knew that this deadline had been set for August the 31st. We knew all of this, and yet we didn't take enough action to get people out, to prepare for this, to evacuate the civilians and others in advance, and to make sure we had full list of these these Afghan interpreters who's helped us against the Taliban. You don't need hindsight to have actually done something very, very different. You must agree with that.
Well, first of all, in relation to the planning since the February 2020 US deal with the Taliban, of course, that was predicated on striving and trying to get the Taliban and the talks with the non-Taliban Afghan actors to make progress. There's still a possibility of that, but it looks very challenging as well. That is the way you'd get a more inclusive government. In terms of the cases that you described, I mean, as I said, we put in place the arrangements in earnest from April. So we've been at this and we've had 11,000 people secured safe passage out of Afghanistan. The cases we're left with, many of them are the trickiest. So just to give you one illustration of what that means, we've got the lion's share, the vast majority of the mono-nationals, the single British nationals who've got documentation out with their dependents. The challenge is the bigger family units that you often have in Afghanistan, where some may have documentation, others don't. Some are mono-nationals, some are dual nationals, others it's not clear whether they're nationals at all. They all want to leave together. And I think it's right, both with the Afghan workers and the nationals, that we have a basic level of checks in place, not least on the Arab scheme, to make sure that we don't find people slipping into the country who might do us or wish us harm.
As indeed was the concern with someone arriving in Birmingham. Just finally, in terms of what happens over the next few days, getting as many civilians, British and Afghans, out of the country, and then the evacuation of our troops and lots of our goods. The big concern also at the moment is not just the reaction of the Taliban, but also ISIS and other terror forces, the threat of a bomb or a suicide attack on, tens of thousands of people at Kabul airport. How big a risk is that, do you think, to our forces and to the civilians there?
Well, look, I think it's a significant strategic priority for us, and I think the Taliban releasing of the jails alerted us, of course, to that risk, but it's always been there. And I think beyond the importance of securing safe passage for our nationals, the Afghan workers, after the evacuation and the withdrawal of troops, probably the number one priority is making sure that the Taliban live up to their crystal clear assurances not to allow their territory to be used as a base for terrorist attacks. They clearly have a strong vested interest in that, in terms of their own stability, the stability of their neighbours. Countries right around the periphery of Afghanistan have an interest in that. We've got to work as best we can, engage with them and those partners to hold them to those assurances that they've given.
Okay, Dominic Raab, Foreign Secretary, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed for that.